Hello, everyone. This is Jim. I'm here with a request. I want to have a poll on this site, but apparently I have to have many more subscribers before I can have a poll. So please, if you're listening to these stories and enjoying them, or even if you're not enjoying them, subscribe. It won't cost you anything, and I won't be sending you any unsolicited emails or anything like that. Just you'll be helping me out, and maybe I'll be able to finally put a poll on this site. Thank you. We now resume our original broadcast. Today's reading is The Conclusion of Sunlight or Rock by John Kessel. They went back to the cafe and ordered 2 wines. Erno let Louise pay. By the time they got there, the first period had started. They watched on Tony's front window across the street. The Gunners were skating with more energy than they had showed in a month. They spent as much time in the Aristocrats' end as they did in their own, a distinct novelty. They scored first on a blue-line slap shot. They kept the Aristos off balance with brutal forechecking. Erno sat on the edge of his seat. At the end of the first period, during a power play, the Gunner forward leapt over the crease, soaring over the defender who was trying to check him. The center slapped a shot into the air that the forward deflected with the blade of his stick over the goalie's right shoulder into the net. The arena exploded with cheers. Erno leapt out of his seat, flew 3 meters into the air. Louise caught him coming down, swung him around, and hugged him. The sudden physical contact startled Erno. He realized he had not been touched by another human being since the last time he and Anadem had had sex. "You see?" Louise shouted, kissing him. What a strange place this was. Sex was rationed, money was rationed, sex was worth money, and money was sexy. Erno thought about what he would do with his winnings. After getting back his ring, he would go to the clinic and make sure Alwa was all right. Then he would, one way or another, even if he had to pay for it, what did they call it? Get laid. 30 seconds into the second period, the Aristocrats scored. The second period was fought out at mid-ice, with few clear shots taken by either team. It began to worry Erno that the Aristocrats were playing as well as they were. They did not look like a team that was trying to lose. When he mentioned this, Louise replied that probably it was only a couple of players that were in the bag for the game. "Why didn't you say that before?" "What did you expect? It doesn't take a whole team to throw a game, Erno. A couple of key plays will do it." In the third period, the Aristocrats put on a furious rush. The puck ricocheted off the dome of netting. Flying passes deflected by leaping frontliners ended on the blade of a forward just hitting the crease, and only inspired goalkeeping by the Gunner netminder kept his team ahead. 5 minutes in, the Aristocrats executed a 3-carom shot off the dome that was slapped into the corner of the net by a lurking forward. A minute later, they scored on a fluke deflection off the skate of a defenseman. Aristos up 3-2. Falling behind seemed to inspire the Gunners, and they fought back, putting several good shots on net that the Aristocrats' goalie blocked. Erno could not sit down. He paced the cafe, hitting the concrete so hard with each step that he floated. When the clock hit 10 minutes remaining, he turned to Louise and said, "I can't stand this." He left and hurried down to the arena, hoping to get inside. But though the doors were open, a uniformed chimera stood outside. "Can I get in?" Erno asked. "1 ducat," the chimera said. His ears were pointed, his pale face smooth as a baby's, his ancient brown eyes impassive as agates. His uniform sported green-lighted epaulets and a matching fluorescent belt. Attached to the belt was a stun baton. Please, Erno said. There are only a few minutes left. You may enter if you have credit. Erno could hear the crowd inside shouting, occasionally cheering. He paced back and forth, staring at his feet. If he had any credit, he could just walk through the door. But his bracelet was gone. He had given everything he owned to Luis Adoyaha. How could he have been so stupid? Suddenly, a huge roar burst from the arena door as he ran over to the guard. What is it? What happened? The Chimera cupped a hand over his ear. The Gunners tied the game, a wraparound goal. How much time is left? 2 minutes and 52 seconds. Please let me in. No. Erno walked in circles. His scalp tingled and his ears rang. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Police score, he thought. Police score. He looked up at the roof of the labatube. The air was hazy there. The light from the heliotropes dimmed down to indicate night. High up on the catwalks, a couple of kids were screwing. Erno kicked the pavement with his frayed slippers. Cheers came from the open door. Erno could imagine the crowd standing now, shouting, shaking their fists at the players. The last 2 minutes were taking an eternity. If they went to overtime, Erno did not think he could stand it. Then came a huge gasp, an oceanic groan, punctuated by shouts and cries of anger, even despair. A couple of minutes later, the first of the people began to exit the arena, cursing, arguing, laughing bitterly, or completely silent. As she passed him, Erno heard one woman say to her surly companion, "Well, at least they played a good game." Luis was not there when Erno got back to the cafe. Erno snuck back into his room and threw himself onto the gel mat. He lay on his back with his hands behind his head and stared at the ceiling. 3 bugs were fixed motionless up there, microcams trained on him. No one, he reminded himself, cared enough to be watching. The ceiling was made of regolith adobe, so old that it probably had been constructed by people instead of RIOPs. Those swirls and grooves laden with dirt had been brushed into the surface by some long-dead hand. How many people had lain in this room and stared at the ceiling? How many had been as broke as Erno? How many people had shouted rage and frustration at each other in this room? How many had made love here? How many children had been conceived? How many plans made and abandoned? Well, he had to plan now. First thing he had to plan was how to get his things out of the hotel without Anadem seeing him. If he tried to carry a bag out, she would know at once that he was jumping, which meant that he could take only what he could wear. There wasn't much left anyway. He stripped and put on his 2 remaining shirts and his jacket and shorts beneath his trousers. He began sweating, and he felt like a fool, but in the mirror he didn't look too absurd. He stuffed his notebook into one pocket, his specs into another. He still had his quarter, his last money in the world. Outside his room, the light that Alwa had made miraculously brighter by his touch that morning had burned out. 1 floor down, he heard laughter coming from Tessa and Teresa's room. When he hit the lobby, he found Anadem sprawled on the chaise in her office. "Your rent?" she called. "Back in 5 minutes," he said, saluting her as he walked out. He hurried down to the cafe, hoping to find Luis. Night was falling. The heliotropes were masked. Music blared from the back, staccato drums and pipes, a song he remembered from home. The pop star, Cloud's Daughter, Sunlight or Rock. The cafe was crowded, talk was loud, but when he asked around, Tony said Luis had not been there since the afternoon. Suddenly, the weight of the day and of the last 6 months came down on Erno so heavily that his knees buckled and he sat down on the pavement. He put his head in his hands. Through the buzz of conversations came Cloud's daughter's sweet, mocking voice. "But it seems you were mistaken, and the truth came as a shock. About which one was stronger, sunlight or rock?" He looked down the alley where Alwa had been beaten. Anadem would not have him beaten, he reckoned. He'd just starve, be arrested, put into the freezers until some enterprise paid his way out as an indentured worker. Erno blinked his eyes quickly to keep back the tears. Something moved in the shadows. In the alley, a dog was nosing around. Erno lifted his head, got to his feet, and went back to see. It was his neighbor, Brian. "What are you doing here?" he asked it. The dog raised its narrow white face. "Good evening, sir," it growled. "I smell something." Something moved, scuttling beneath discarded papers. There were few small animals in this colony, not even birds. Not in this misbegotten place, where they didn't even have a real ecology, just people. Brian tensed, ears laid back. "Stay," Erno said, grabbing the collar of the dog's shirt. He reached forward, pushed aside the paper, and there, clenched into a fist, found Alwa's artificial hand. "Can I have it?" the dog whined piteously. "No." Erno reached into his pocket, pulled out his quarter, and slipped it into Brian's breast pocket. "Good dog. Buy yourself a biscuit." The dog looked uncertain, then raised its ears and walked away, nails clicking on the pavement. Erno poked the hand with his finger. As soon as he touched it, it twitched away. In the dim light, Erno could make out that the wrist was sticky with some fluid that might have been blood, but was probably something more complex. This was not some cheap servo. It had independent power and rudimentary intelligence. Erno cornered the hand, picked it up, and shoved it inside his shirt. It stopped moving, but it made a bulge that he hid by holding his arm against his side. It was warm. He could feel the fluid against his skin. From Calviernes he went down to the Port Authority. The station was not busy at this hour, except for passengers waiting for the night train and aphasics preparing to bed down in dark corners. On the board were listed the bi-weekly cable car to Remus Salis, another to La Vernier, and the daily maglev to the southern colonies, Apollo 12, Hestidus, Tycho, Clavius, all the way down to Shackleton. A ticket to Shackleton cost 60 ducats. He didn't even have his quarter. But he did have Alwa's hand, a hand in which Alwa had invested a great deal, maybe more than was immediately evident. The portal would read any standard credit chip. Erno walked to the entrance of the maglev platform. He stood up straight, tried to act like he knew exactly where he was going, and had not the slightest worry in the world. A businessman passed through the portal ahead of him. Erno fell in behind. He held his forearm against his side, pressing the hand inside his shirt against his belly. As they approached the portal, the fingers of the hand began to move. Erno did not flinch. He passed through the portal. The hand, under his shirt, froze. He strode down the tube and felt the air pressure change as he passed through the lock to the train waiting in the airless tunnel. He stepped into the maglev. The telltale at the door flashed green, and Erno was through. He passed down the aisle of the car, checking out the compartments as he passed. Most of them were occupied by people who looked no more prosperous than Erno. He slid open the door of an empty compartment and took a seat by the window. Against his belly, he felt the warmth of the artificial hand. Alwa had stashed at least 60 ducats in here. How much more besides? He wondered what Alwa was doing at the moment. He had probably been mustered out of the clinic as soon as they'd patched him up. Back at the Hotel Gijon. Could he even open the door to his room? 10 minutes later, the doors closed, the umbilicus pulled away, and the train began to move. They passed out of the dark tunnel into the bright lunar day, and as the maglev swooped up into the Carpathians, the Earth, in its first quarter, swung into sight high above them. Erno was still not used to it. On the cable trip from Sander, he had been fascinated to see the planet rise above the horizon as it came from the far side to the near. That first sight of it in reality, only months ago, had seemed pregnant with meaning. He was moving into a new world, and it hung there still, turquoise and silver, shining with organic life as it had hung for several billion years. It was strange to imagine a world with air and water on the outside, where you could walk out in shirt sleeves, even naked, where the sun shining down on you was not an enemy, but a pleasure. But gravity there would press a lunar-bred boy like Erno to the ground and leave him gasping. He leaned his head against the train's window, the light of the old Earth throwing shadows on his face, and fell asleep.